الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
I wish to say finally, as I've said many times before, that this is not a war with Islam. It angers me, as it angers the vast majority of Muslims, to hear bin Laden and his associates described as Islamic terrorists. They are terrorists, pure and simple. Islam is a peaceful and tolerant religion, and the acts of these people are wholly contrary to the teachings of the Quran.
I also want to speak tonight directly to Muslims throughout the world. We respect your faith. It's practiced freely by many millions of Americans and by millions more in countries that America counts as friends. Its teachings are good and peaceful, and those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah. The terrorists...
I want you to understand, I want the world to understand that our actions today were not aimed against Islam. The faith of hundreds of millions of good, peace-loving people all around the world, including the United States. No religion condones the murder of innocent men, women, and children. But our actions were aimed at fanatics and killers who wrap murder in the cloak of righteousness, and in so doing, profane the great religion in whose name they claim to act.
My name is Ken Bigley from Liverpool and Bolton district. I'm here in Iraq, and I think this is possibly my last chance to speak to somebody who will listen from you. I need you to be compassionate, as you've always said you were, and help me. I don't want to die.
حتى نراك طليقة مرتاحة وسنبقى نذبح الكفرة حتى نراك عدت إلى أمك وأبيك أو زوجك وبنيك والله أكبر والعزة لله. الله أكبر.
The tendency of Western political leaders to deny the connection between Orthodox Islamic mainstream and terrorist violence is replicated in the universities and the media. Wherever you look, both in Western Europe and in North America, the members of the elite class have this tendency to proclaim Islam, some mysterious, authentic Islam, to be peaceful and to be tolerant, and those Muslims prone to violence are proclaimed to be non-representative fringe. Well, I would really appreciate if people who make such claims could then explain the continuity of violence from the earliest day of Islam, from the earliest days of the Prophet and his immediate successors throughout the 13 centuries of recorded history.
The real burning question in the world today is, does Islam and Islamic civilization actually sanction the violence that we're seeing being perpetrated in its name around the world? And to that we have to answer, if we're going to be honest about it, an unqualified yes. The Islamic sources, the Islamic texts, starting with the Quran, but not limited to the Quran, the Islamic texts including the Hadith, Islamic tradition, Islamic theology, Islamic law, the traditions of the interpretation of the Quran throughout history and Islamic history itself all bear witness to the fact that Islam has a developed doctrine, theology, and law that mandates violence against unbelievers.
The origins are, of course, in the Muslim desire to impose all over the world the only religion, the only just religion, which is Islam, and the suppression of all other religions in order to establish the rule of Allah over the whole earth. This is a religious duty which binds the whole community and which the Muslim community is obliged to impose, because they are obliged to obey the order of Allah, and this is the desire of Allah as expressed in the Quranic revelation.
I believe that those terrorists that want to do harm to others are applying the true Islam that was practiced by Muhammad and his followers in the early stage of Islam.
In Islamic theology, the Prophet Muhammad is considered al-insan al-kamil, which is the perfect man. He is the model par excellence to be imitated. He is the person that the more a Muslim is like him, the better off he is. So the Prophet Muhammad is revered today in the Islamic world as the primary model of human behavior.
Well, when Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, wiped out all the Jews from Saudi Arabia, there was 3 tribes, Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayda, Banu Qaynuqa. We were proudly studying this in school as Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, ordered the beheading of the Jews of Banu Qurayda and the women being taken as concubines. As soon as a child had pubic hair, he was beheaded. So the Jewish population was either extradited or beheaded. The story of Rabbi Qanina is a well-known documented story in Islam. Rabbi Qanina was tortured by the order of the Prophet of Islam himself. His eyes were put out. He was burned in order to confess where the Jewish tribes were hiding their goods, their gold and their silver and all those kind of things. And this is right from the Hadith. This inspired us as Palestinians, inspired us on fighting jihad against the Jews in Palestine.
Authoritative Islamic History, The Life of Muhammad, Sirat Rasulullah, by Muhammad bin Ishaq, edited by Abdul Malik bin Hisham, translated by Professor Alfred Guillaume. Then the Qurayza tribe surrendered, and the apostle confined them in Medina. Then the apostle went out to the market of Medina and dug trenches in it. Then he sent for them and struck off their heads in those trenches as they were brought out to him in batches. There were 600 or 700 in all, though some put the figure as high as 800 or 900.
Another example, that may be even more chilling, of the deleterious influence that Muhammad's example has upon the Islamic world was exemplified recently by an Egyptian leader of a radical Muslim party who wrote just recently that he couldn't believe that the beheadings in Iraq were being protested by Muslims. Weren't they aware that the Prophet Muhammad himself beheaded between 600 and 900 men personally, members of the Jewish Qurayza tribe in Arabia, after he had defeated them? Didn't they realize that if the Prophet did it, then this was the proper way to behave? And so the Mujahideen in Iraq, who were beheading people, are simply obeying the example of the Prophet. Now we can see then